Mina. Generally speaking, I don't like to review games that I haven't either at least completed or seen at least enough of the game to be certain of my judgment. After all, a game could have a sudden difficulty spike or a flaw that only reveals itself towards the end, such as a bad ending or a feeling that the game was unfinished. For longer form games such as RPGs, this is quite important. Imagine playing a game with an epic story that you have been intimately following, and then at the end it pulls Deus Ex Machina, such as revealing that it was all a dream, and all of it was for nothing. Stuff like that affects my scoring, and Pocket King on the Game Boy required a thorough playing through before I passed my judgment. Pocket King is a very interesting turn-based strategy RPG released by Namco very late in the Game Boy's life, in 2001, only in Japan. It's one of the last batch of dual Game Boy Game Boy Color compatible games. It draws from a much earlier 1988 Namco release but Atlus developed Famicom title, King of Kings. That was an interesting and slightly simple turn-based strategy RPG, but it's clear someone at Namco asked the question, what if we cross King of Kings or a turn-based strategy RPG with Pokemon? Pocket King is the answer. Pokemon clones have been two a penny, offering two slightly different releases of the game, but not really deviating much from the gameplay from the series that revived the Game Boy. Pocket King is a really quite ingenious extension of the older Famicom game, blended with Pokemon's character evolution, forming parties of up to 3 units as part of your strategy, and allowing exchange of your leveled up or evolved characters to another Game Boy. Best of all, there is only one Pocket King cartridge, no green and blue, no silver and gold, just one edition of the game. The game offers 2 main play modes, a story mode called Heroic Mode, and a head-to-head battle mode across 40 maps supporting either a single Game Boy or link cable play. In addition, there is an exchange or Kokan mode for swapping your characters with a linked Game Boy, and a Zukan, an equivalent to your Pokédex, where the partners you meet on your campaigns will appear, as well as the basic classes you start the game with, and their evolved or leveled up counterparts. The meat of the game is the heroic mode, where you'll play as Elric, whose father has been slain in an attack by the evil army. Across numerous campaigns, you'll take the place of the kingdom's prince in leading your forces against the forces of evil, usually with the objective of overthrowing the leader in the campaign, but sometimes to destroy all the enemies, to protect an ally, to occupy all of the towns, and so on. On completing a campaign, you will rescue a partner and they will join you on your quest, and some of these partners will be your friends that you rescue along the way. The story is fairly generic, but the dialogue is amusing enough as Elric behaves like a bull in a china shop, and your friends find themselves in all sorts of funny situations, such as Ryan with his big appetite. It's not going to challenge Chrono Trigger, but it bops along, not harming the gameplay in any real way, and it's entirely skippable if you don't understand Japanese. Just remember, you gain a new partner on completing the campaign. That's the most important part. During a campaign, when you dispatch a unit, if they don't die in battle, they can be carried over to the next campaign maintaining their stats, which will become essential later in the game. However, if they're slain in battle, they are lost for good, but the class is still available to breed a new unit of that class at base stats. However, the partners that join you after you rescue them at the end of a campaign work similarly, but if they are slain in battle, they can return, stats intact, for the next campaign. The more battles each unit fights, the more experience they earn, which in turn leads to their evolution. Once the unit has evolved, that unit's class becomes available for you to create freely as a new unit. For example, a harpy can evolve into a birdman, and once you've evolved at least one harpy to a birdman, the birdman class can be created at will, assuming you have enough MP. Units can be grouped into a party with up to 3 units at a time, but once a unit joins a party, it can't be split back out again. Depending on the classes of units, they can interact together to enhance their attacks together. This is a key strategy in this game. A party's overall movement range is determined by the unit that has the furthest movement range itself. MP is accrued on each turn, and the more towns you occupy, the more MP you'll earn when it's your next turn. Therefore, there is an incentive to occupy towns in a way, but not just for MP purposes. A town can become occupied or senor by any unit of the human class, and can also be taken from the enemy's control when one of your human class units enters it. But vice versa can also occur when towns under your control can be annexed by the enemy. Once you have brought a town under your occupation, any unit, whether a human type is present in the party or not, will have their health points gradually restored if they survive the enemy's turn, meaning that this is another good reason to occupy the towns. In short, your strategy will depend on the campaign's goals, as sometimes it is easier to occupy just enough towns to be able to have a bit of a stronghold before launching your attack on, say, occupying some ruins, instead of overthrowing the enemy leader and still achieving one of the campaign's goals. Critically, when Elric is not occupying a home castle, new units or partners can't be called up for battle. As such, it's very rare for you to need to remove Elric. I could talk about the items you gain in battle, the types of characters and so forth, but it's all fairly standard strategy RPG stuff there. Items to increase defense, movement and attack stats and so on and so forth, along with magic being accrued along the way to enhance your unit's attacks. It's all very well executed and plays much better than King of Kings, from where much of Pocket King got much of its basis from. The link cable mode is actually really rather special, as it allows you to play a head-to-head battle with a friend, assuming in this day and age you can find 2 Game Boys, a link cable and a couple of copies of Pocket King. It really is a lot of fun if you manage it though, and of course, being a bit of a geek, of course I have 2 Game Boys and it means to do this. I wonder though whether this mode ever really got the use it deserves even back in the day, as when Pocket King was released, the Game Boy Advance was just on the horizon and ready to be released. Maybe this game got overlooked with that and Pokemon being such a juggernaut. I certainly don't hear of many people talking about it now. I'm going to level with you though. Rating this game has been really tough. Remember, we don't give ratings on a rubbish heap on the basis of, well, it's good for the Game Boy. All games are rated on their own merits. Of course, expecting Unicorn Overlord levels of strategy RPG depth on the Game Boy may be a little bit far-fetched, but the game still has to be engaging and fun to play to be good, and has to be very well put together with some real finesse to exceed this. For a while, I was finding the campaigns mostly a real pushover, but I was having fun. But whilst this was happening, I was being nagged. Is this game going to get challenging? And the answer is, it does towards the end. I contemplated whether this was a good thing or not, and in the end I think it was a necessary design choice, as you needed a good chance to evolve and build your stable of partners to call upon in the tougher battles ahead, as you cannot refight campaigns to grind. You can grind within a campaign, just don't achieve the objective and you can grind away to your heart's content, and this may actually be quite a good idea, though I didn't do this. But each time I played Pocket King, I was drawn in and I was engrossed in it. Admittedly, I do like strategy games, and that has to count for something. But if I wasn't having a good time, I would have known. I think the fusing of the strategy RPG elements with Pokemon elements works really well. And sure, the unit exchange in between Game Boys is a little tacked on perhaps, and a little bit useless in this day and age, but it can serve a purpose. Another quality of life aspect is that you'll receive different endings depending on the order that you complete the campaigns in, as well as which bosses you will face. Taking all of this into account, Pocket King is a great game. 4 out of 5 on a rubbish heap rating scale. It's a shining example of what the humble Game Boy could do. It does play a little bit better on a Game Boy Color, with the colour shading helping differentiate units a little easier, but it is 100% playable on a monochrome Game Boy or Super Game Boy setup. Talking of which, this game has no Super Game Boy enhancements that I could see, either on the original Super Game Boy or the later Super Game Boy 2. The cutting room floors suggest that only the Super Game Boy 2 loads a palette, but I didn't notice any difference personally, and it certainly doesn't add colour like Donkey Kong 94 or Kirby Star Stackers does on the Super Game Boy. It may also be me, but I think this plays a bit better on a Game Boy Color in terms of speed. In terms of the Japanese level, it's playable by everyone, but the menus do need some explaining, which I have translated via a link in the video description, and the manual can be a little bit sparse in explaining what all the items are, even if you can read Japanese. Overall, I rate Japanese level as conversational, as whilst it's all kana-based, with no kanji, it's written with a very casual Japanese that beginners would struggle to grasp, but gameplay-wise, it is fairly easy to get into with a little bit of guidance. Pocket King is really what some people would call a hidden gem. Honestly, I think that this phrase has been cheapened to include forgotten games that are at least not that bad. To me, a hidden gem has to be something special, one lost to time that maybe never got its flowers on release, and perhaps the sheer volume of Pokemon wannabes at the time buried Pocket King. There are hours of gameplay here, backed up with a battery save to allow you to conveniently save mid-battle and pick up where you left off. It is refined with the option to disable time-consuming animations, and presentationally, it's functional, either a bit easier to play on a Game Boy Color, and I adore the character portraits in this game. Pocket King is definitely a Game Boy experience to seek out. Truly rad stuff. As always, like, subscribe and all of that shit, and also check out this rad Rubbish Heap merch, available worldwide on Redbubble and Amazon. See the links below for how to purchase. I've been Saki Endo, and this has been a Rubbish Heap. Ja ne ne!